wise for field trips and whatnot, we'd be open to that as
Yes.
well. You're partnering with PUSD, you're covering 85% of the kids in the area. So that's obviously your target group. And actually on the younger level, pre-high school, it's over 90%. So that makes sense that you'd go there first, but you want to be open to all of our citizens of Prescott. So that's something that you'd be open to as well.
Yes, we've had several charter schools that have come and spent days with us as well. And I mean, really fantastic to see the different ways people are approaching education and getting their kids outside. And we did, I think it was North Point came by for an introduction to Prescott. And they learned about our history and the flora and fauna and just kind of centered themselves in the place they call home.
Great.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thanks for your partnership with the families of Prescott and the schools in Prescott as well. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Any other questions or comments?
No, just thank you. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
And yeah, there's one thing, I'd love to look forward. There is a program from the National League of Cities called Cities Connecting Children to Nature. And there are probably about 30 cities on the map, and Flagstaff just joined. And I think it would be really powerful for our community to join and say, we are a nature community, an outdoor community. We are a place to come and play, and we are a place that centers play and outdoor learning and outdoor wellness for all of the members of our community. So I'm really excited to move forward with that, and with Joe Baines on looking at ways we can involve the children in designing and engaging in the sites as well. There's really great research about participatory design for parks with children. So I think there's a future in my mind of Prescott as the nature play capital of Arizona.
Thank you again.
Thank you.
All right. Our next item on the agenda is the discussion regarding the sale and redevelopment of City Hall.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm Tyler Goodman with the City Manager's Office. We wanted to bring this item to you to give you a general update on how things are going with the RFP for this site, tell you what we've done so far, and get a little bit of direction going forward. And as you know, and I think as most in the public who are following this know, we have updated the due dates for this process. Initially, we were going to have a mandatory site visit here for interested parties on December 16th. And talking to a few and getting some feedback initially in the process, they said that's just not enough time for us to put things together to show up, especially around the holidays. So what we decided was to make that date February 3rd. It'll be right here in these chambers at 3 p.m. on that day. And the new due date for the RFP is April 7th at 2 p.m. And that's when we'll open them. They'll be, we'll take a tally and see who's put in. So those are the new dates. It's giving us more time and more flexibility. We wanted to do it right, and we knew that there wasn't a huge rush. And in previous experience with the other RFP we put out several years ago, that was one of the comments, was it just wasn't enough time for interested parties to put in. So we thought that was in the best interest. And just to keep you up to date on what we've done to market the property, we've done a few smaller things like a general press release that we put out. We are working with social media. We have a recurring post that's being spread out there on this opportunity. We have contacted and sent out information to a local list of commercial realtors. And we also inquired with the city of Phoenix, trying to understand better how do they handle their process if they're offloading city property. And through that, we got a lot of great information, one of which was they have a very large list of mostly Valley-based either developers, builders, chambers of commerce, just different influential people who are interested in those processes. And so we distributed this information directly from our website and the RFP packet, all of that directly to that list, hoping that it will generate a lot more exposure. So that's been out there for over a month. Now, in general, we have discussed previously with the council the idea of bringing on realty services, a realtor to help us market this property. And we want to receive some general direction if that is still the case. If that is, we as staff could take that back, figure out the options of what we need to do, and bring that forward to council with a specific proposal. But just wanted to give you that update and get your general direction on that one.
Councilman Montoya.
Tyler, thanks for the update. I guess my question is, if we were to engage a realtor or a realtor, how wide of a net would we be casting for that? Would we stay within local market, or would we go beyond that?
Councilman Montoya, I'll field that for Tyler. My thought is, if you were interested in a commercial real estate agent, I think that you'd be looking to cast a wider net, that you would look for somebody that had either at least regional and maybe national credentials that could look to bring in not only Valley investors or developers, but maybe developers in the Southwest or even national development outfits that have done things like this. We had a conversation with, well, I'll tell you, Shane Shumway from Hilton Garden Inn about just suggestions about how far he would cast the net. And he suggested that if that was a route we were interested in, there are people that specialize this at a national and regional level that it might be worth, kind of picking their brain or retaining. I don't know that you would get much value from something local.
Yeah, that was my immediate thought in asking that question, was that I think, given, I think the last time we put this out for RFP, it was designed to still hold the city business inside the building. So that was a limitation. But I would think that taking that out of the equation makes this a lot more valuable property and worth bringing in someone with a little more skill of a set of doing this nationally.
But we just brought this up for discussion. I know some of you have expertise in this field, and if you think that there's value to retaining somebody that does this for a living, we'd be glad to look at it.
I have another question regarding, you mentioned that you put it out on social media and some other things. Are there other resources that you're considering using to leverage? And also, when you've talked to other municipalities like Phoenix, have you looked at what are the resources beyond just sending it out to a list that they're using to unload city assets?
Yes, and typically it's resources like LoopNet, the commercial real estate listing service. And to be honest, we've held off on that, waiting to see if we want direction, if we want to bring in professional help who would help take care of that and other ways of exposing this opportunity more broadly. So there are ways that we could continue internally to market it and promote it, but just wanted to see if that professional help would be valuable to us.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Tenney.
Maybe you could just give us the 90-second nutshell version of your feeling on pros and cons of doing it both ways, doing it in-house versus not. You've talked about casting a wider net. Obviously, with a pro that way, there's obviously a cost associated with that as well. Maybe you could just kind of ballpark the taxpayer cost for bringing in a commercial agent, or maybe that would be value added. We get, it's going to cost us $50,000, but we'll sell it for $60,000 more if we bring some.
And Councilman Tenney, I think that's the cost benefit analysis that we all need to come to a conclusion on about how we want to proceed. I mean, obviously, a commercial real estate agent is going to get up to 6% commission off the sale of a property. So 6% sale on this site is a significant amount of money. But you allude to some of the potential pros, which is, if you cast a wider net, do you have more competition? Does the additional competition exceed the 6% you're paying in commission? And I think there's a really good chance there is. I've had multiple development entities and individuals tell me that this is one of the most attractive corners for redevelopment in Arizona. This is completely a different animal than McCormick. I don't think McCormick would rate anywhere near that, and not one of the most attractive corners in Prescott, but this has, because of the proximity to Courthouse Square and what's happening with the post office, and just because we're Arizona's Christmas city and the like, that this has at least regional and maybe national appeal. And if there's a desire to go that route, just like other items on the agenda we have later today about hiring a consultant to find us the best city attorney, do you take advantage of those resources and acknowledge your own limitations? We are not experts at unloading land. We're certainly not experts at casting a very wide net. I think there's value to seeking somebody out to help us with this, but there is a cost, and the cost is going to be up to 6% of the sale.
Great. Thank you for a good encapsulation.
Yeah.
Councilwoman Hall.
Thank you. So yeah, as from my experience in commercial real estate, I know we've talked about it a little bit before, but I think there's just no question when it comes to this property, when it, that we absolutely should engage somebody on a national level, and probably if there's someone we can find with municipal experience to help,
Big too.
yeah, to help coordinate what, okay, no asking price, bid offer, that all those differences that you have to work through. How big is this corner parcel?
It's 1.3
1.4.
or 1.4.
And it's all the same parcel?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there might be a couple parcels within it, but in totality,
we could redo the lines.
And
if
is
we
the
had to.
zoning business general? Do we know? what
Yeah,
the
it's
zoning
downtown
business-
business. John.
Oh,
So there's
okay.
no parking requirement.
Okay.
And we have maximized the frontage we can on Cortez by shifting. Do you have a picture of the?
yeah, in fact, I could pull that up.
Would you like to see it? Maybe?
If we could,
Yeah.
I'm just more curious about the nature of how we're going to market it and how we're going to try to position it to put it out there for sale. I mean, obviously, if you still hire a national, whether it's a whole firm or if it's just the people that do that type of resource for redevelopment, you guys, I'm assuming, have something in mind.
We do. And Tyler could go over briefly to the RFP that we've drafted, because that was with the last council, is it not? It might be worth pulling that up and letting them
yes, I
look at it.
believe it
We have an
was.
RFP.
Right.
That has a lot of criteria, a ranking system based on a ton of different elements. There it is.
Do you want me to jump down to the map first?
Yeah,
Michael,
let's
or-
do that. And then,
We'll scroll down to the map.
and Councilwoman Hall, we modeled this after a lot of other initiatives in other municipalities. So as you can
Right.
see, it's at 1.3 acres. It's the city hall site, the parking lot, the legal department, and then we repositioned the police department parking lot. We're going to shift the fence so there's more frontage on Cortez. Right now, the parking lot, Tyler could show the direction it goes. It goes
It's right here.
like here. But we thought it was more valuable to have more street frontage for a potential redevelopment project.
Okay. And then does a property like this also have the minimums? Do you have a minimum or anything like that? on
There's
here, or
actually
you
no
just do the
setback
RFP?
requirements in this.
No, I'm sorry, not setbacks, but like to be even put in for a bid or any type of.
Did we set a minimum
background.
amount? I don't think we
We
did.
did not set a minimum. Mm-mm.
And we could pull up the criteria in the ranking system.
I was just, I don't know that you need it on something like this. I just was curious, I guess.
Yeah.
But I don't think, because do we even have the resources to handle inquiries and showings and
We
questions?
could walk
on-
people through the parking lot, and we could show them the bucket in my hallway and why they might not want to try to refurbish this lovely facility. But
That's rainwater harvesting.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Rusty water harvesting. Yeah. And so we had a criteria that had, that's the 100%, and it's approach the project. I guess, why don't I let you walk through this in
Sure.
5 minutes or less?
Well, if it's public, if it's just for my knowledge, I can do research on it, but I was just more.
Oh, that's okay.
Oh, this is a
It
good.
seems to me like just even fielding the inquiries and the responses, let alone
Having somebody.
the benefit of a realtor too. The 6% is hard, but it's at the same time they walk you through that whole process, start to finish, which will likely include bank financing and proposals for redevelopment and anything that they have to study and traffic. And it's nice because they're the ones that get to hold their hand instead of us
Yeah.
when we get to that point, I guess.
But this is good to go over this just briefly. These are the criteria that we've included for the ranking, which will eventually come back. We haven't determined yet. This will be in conjunction with the mayor, but trying to figure out a review team to review proposals and then eventually bring back the top proposal to the city council. But we're going to be looking at the approach to the project, which several pages above this is about a full page length of describing in detail what that even means, so that they can understand what are we looking for, and they can really outline in great specificity what it is they're going to be doing. Second is the experience and their availability with their current workload and other projects. That's at 20%. The overall purchase price we put at 30%. And then the ability to commit to deliver a completed project within 36 months of the notice to proceed is another 20%. On top of that, when we brought this to council, probably about 4 or 6 weeks ago, we also, the discussion was to include an extra 10%, basically a bonus percentage amount for projects that could incorporate workforce housing units. We didn't specify how many or what that really entails detailed wise, but it's there if they can do that.
I'm assuming they'll be small.
Yeah.
Might
Mini
be a lot.
units.
Might be a couple. It might be very big.
We didn't
59 grand.
we didn't part of the 100% criteria, and we left it open ended that if somebody found something creative, we might give them extra credit or we might not. And I think that that's a good way to do it, and see if the private sector gets creative about finding a way for one or two people to walk out of an apartment here and walk to the police department.
Oh yeah, no, it's wonderful.
So
There's always 10% of the less desirable part of a development, right?
yeah, right.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Like we mentioned before, I think this property is very high profile and generate a lot of interest, and I'm 100% supportive of hiring a commercial professional to do this job, because if we don't, it's going to be like a FSBO, for sale by owner, and I just don't think that would be a good idea.
Councilman Montoya.
I just want to ask a question. I know that initially there was some intention, or I imagine there still is some intention, to use the proceeds of this building to pay down the debt of purchasing the other building. I guess my question is, did the previous council set an urgency around selling this property? I mean, I see the 36 months up there, but I mean, are we willing to kind of wait and make sure we get the best use for it and the best price for it? I mean, is that reasonable?
I think that's a really good question for you guys to talk about at the dais. Is the last council felt, I think, a desire to move in a fairly expeditious manner to help pay down the debt, but we're certainly willing to slow this down if you guys feel like more time is needed, or you want to get your arms around it, or, I mean, we're completely flexible as a staff.
Well, I'll make a couple of comments. I think this is such a significant and substantial property, and it'll have such a long-term impact on the nature of our courthouse plaza that we do need to reach much broader potential developers. When the original look at it, when the FOPU group looked at it a couple of years ago, there was some expectation that this would be a way of developing it and giving a new city hall on this location at the same time. And that was really so difficult to even contemplate or design that we only had one bidder on that. And the concept was really, I think, unacceptable and really unrealistic. So I think considering the magnitude and the importance of this particular project, we should engage somebody that can reach a much broader geographical or developmental reach, so that we will have a project that we can all be proud of and know that it's going to contribute to the nature of the downtown area for many, many, many years to come. So yeah, I would support also more of a, I don't think we need a real speedy process. We should be able to take our time and be able to market it well, and then evaluate the potential proposals, and not totally be focused on a sale price. It really needs to fit in with the nature of the downtown.
It's a legacy project.
Councilman Shishka.
Thanks, Mayor. Just a few words. I think that this will absolutely be a signature project for the city of Prescott. We should take as much time as possible to make sure that it's a signature project. And, we could be known for years and years to come by what this project looks like. So we need to do it right. Good enough just isn't.
Oh, no.
Nice.
Never heard that one before.
Waiting for that shoe to
Just kind of
drop.
pulled it out of the air.
Yeah.
It's not that
Well played.
All right.
Got to trademark that.
Any further comments, suggestions? Tyler, I think you have a pretty good direction here, right?
We do. Yes. Yes.
Well,
thank
very
you.
good. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is a presentation and update regarding the American Rescue Plan Act and its impact on our city budget and our plans for that.
Thank you, Mayor. Mark Woodfell, Budget and Finance Director.
Thank you, Mark.
So, wanted to cover a bunch of acronyms that we'll use today. Today's acronym between doing this and other stuff, but the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, that was the CARES Act, and the American Rescue Plan Act. I thought it'd be good just to kind of cover that previous one real quick so we were clear on that as we look at what we're going to do with ARPA. So the CARES Act came in March 27th, 2020, $2 trillion of economic relief. Title V of it put $150 billion to help state local governments of 500,000 and more. And in Arizona, that eliminated 88 of the 91 cities. There's only 3 cities in Arizona that are over 500,000 in size. Anybody know who they are? There he goes. He got them, all 3 right off the bat. People always forget about how big Mesa actually is. So the state decided to develop AZ CARES funding. They put $440 million in the fund to distribute money to local governments to help alleviate other needs in the general fund. They basically allowed that to be used to cover public safety costs. Didn't need to be directly related to the pandemic, but that was to provide funds in the general fund to help alleviate other issues, other things that were coming up as part of the pandemic. City received $5,850,816 through that AZ CARES fund. It had a time frame that it had to be recovered from of March 1st to December 30th. We were able, because we have both police and fire, we were able to recover our share of that, but before the end of fiscal year 20 by June 27th. So what did the $5 million that we had relief on get used for? $200,000 was allocated to the COVID pod sites for vaccination. $92,500 was spent on the Center for the Future to help get that established and help do some of the remodel over there. The Prescott North and Granite Creek area plan was allocated out of that. We'd had a contract for additional tourism and marketing attraction for $60,000. And then council might remember back in August, council decided to buy a $10 million piece of property out by the airport, $9.9 million. So $4,356,000 of that came from the CARES funding. The remaining 3.8 of that came from the fund balance in the general fund. We used up our available fund balance in the general fund other than our reserve requirement. And the other 1.8 resulted in projects being frozen in this year and been pushed off to the next year to cover that amount. And again, that's where all the CARES money went. And again, feel free to interrupt me as we go. As we look through ARPA, we're going to talk about all the areas. I'm going to highlight the areas that staff feel are kind of important that we should really consider using. Okay, ARPA was about a year later from CARES, March 11th of 2021, $1.9 trillion, $350 billion to state, cities, and tribal governments, and there's 45.6 of that for cities. Now, the city received a direct allocation for this as opposed to the CARES fund, which was allocated through a state program. So this is a direct allocation from the federal government. It's done in 2 separate installments, one this year and one next year. The Treasury issued the preliminary guidelines for this back in May 17th, and I think almost every month since then they have added to them with clarity and in some case not so clarity every time they put out another pronouncement on what this money can be used for. The time frame, which is very important, we've discussed this, all this money hitting the market, all these projects, hard to find people to do them. The time frame is March 3rd of 2021 through December 31st, 2024. You must incur the cost or commit the funds. The funds don't have to be, the projects don't have to be completed and funds spent until December 31st of 2026. So we do have time to look at bigger projects and get those bigger projects done and still meet the
Mark?
grant requirements. Yes, sir.
Can I just ask you a question about
Certainly.
does the federal government define what committing the funds is?
I would be entering into a contract, but the work has to be done by the December 31st of 26.
So it wouldn't be like if we put it out for like a bid, that wouldn't meet that standard.
I think you're going to have to have the bids in and a contract.
Okay.
I think it is a commitment.
Got it.
Not a thought to commit.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So now that this is a direct federal grant to the city, there's reporting requirements. And as you'll remember from our wonderful, enlightening discussion of financial reports that we issued a few weeks ago, we do a single audit every year with our outside auditor, which is a fascinating process. So this would be part of that audit report that we do each year, which is a critical report. If you have issues on the single audit with internal controls or any of the other 5 reports that are issued with that, you will not be eligible for federal grants, whether that's FAA or anything. It can affect your ability to get grants. So it's something we take very seriously when we set up the controls on these. And just to make life fun, the federal government has looked at ARPA and put out a notice to all auditors that they consider these high-risk programs so that there will be additional auditing requirements done on these. So I say those 2 things just to let you know that there are requirements and we are going to follow them, because it's not, will we be audited? We will be audited every year on this. And we don't want to impact the airport's ability to get grants or Joe's ability to get grants for parks or any of that stuff. We're a smaller city, obviously, and a smaller award amount. So our reporting is slightly less than the bigger cities. We have to do an interim report by the 31st. We will be part of the single audits, like I said, but these are direct reports to the federal government. We have to do an annual report every year by April 30th. The report includes some other additional details. If the city decides to award this to sub-recipients within the community, anything over 50,000, we got to make sure they're in compliance. They have to be part of our reporting and all that thing. All that said, let's talk about what we can use this money for. There's 4 basic areas: public health, negative economic impacts from the pandemic, replacement of lost revenue, water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure, and premium pay for essential workers. So those are the 4 areas. As we look at each one of them, like I say, I'm going to kind of highlight some aspects of it where staff has talked and thought it would be a good way to spend the money. It would be meaningful, not just spending money, but it could benefit the future. Obviously, public health, COVID mitigation, and containment. This includes a lot of things, but one of the things that we want to emphasize here, it includes capital investment in public facilities to help with pandemic operations. So whether that's better air filtration systems in the new city hall, locking components in the new city hall, council chambers and technology to help remote meetings, all those things are something we could look at here. And all those things are significant costs that I believe will exceed our current anticipated budget for the new city hall. So that's something to keep in mind. Obviously, medical expenses and behavioral health care are allowed. Public health safety staff payroll and benefit directly. And like the Arizona Cares, these have to be directly related to COVID. They can't be just assumed all public safety is COVID related. So it's we don't have a lot of those direct related expenses. Now, services to disproportionately impacted areas. Our Mayor Pro Tem Rusing, this is an email I got from you last night. Qualified census tract only applies to this area of these disproportionately impacted areas. And as part of that, that's educational assistance, households assistance, and addressing such social detrimental aspects of those areas. It's a broad category which includes park improvements in this census area, which is another area that we feel would be useful to look at as a city to use. Joe Baines has also heard from the state, since we have qualified census tracts, they have COVID money for parks. They're also looking at it, so we can also incorporate some of their stuff, but we can do things that they're unwilling to do with our COVID money. And assistance to impacted industries, including tourism, travel, and hospitality, just like we did with AZ Cares, that's $60,000. So what is a qualified census tract? Here's our qualified census tract. You can see it goes from Gurley on the lower part of the map. We can zoom it in here a little bit. So it goes from Gurley up Sheldon. This incorporates, obviously, Granite Creek Park. Do that again. It incorporates Granite Creek Park here, I'm sorry, Ken Lindley, the tennis courts, the skate park, that whole complex here, Bill Valley, which is about here, I think, next to the Yavapai College, all the way out up past the high school. So these are the areas that we can use it for, and also our new splash pad over here in that park area near there, whatever might need to be done there.
Just out of curiosity, do you know how they define that? Did they use like the opportunity zone funds to mirror that, or does anybody know? I have no idea.
I also have Melissa Busby from my area, who is the expert in all things grant.
I was just curious. I didn't know. It seemed like it
levels and those type of things.
Yeah, I know they have the opportunity zone fund that they kind of use that to determine some of where you should spend money in your city.
How they determined that it would be just in the qualified census tract. But if you Google qualified census tract, you'll be able to pull it up for any address within the United States.
Yeah, that's wild.
I don't know why they decided that was where. I would assume that it's because of the lower
income.
Yeah, these are generally our lower income CDBG type projects, and stuff can happen a lot in some of these areas.
Yeah, I see it like on the private sector side, they did like opportunity zone funds, so it gave you more incentive to just spend money in that specific area. So I was just curious.
They probably are related.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a generic. Yeah, it's a term. We can use it for lost revenue. There is an actual formula. It's a very complex formula. We obviously did not have much revenue loss related to the pandemic, so we have not gone through the exercise of doing this formula. Don't believe we'd have any cuts or any monies that we could divert from that, but it would open things up. Another big area is water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. And this includes pretty generalized water and sewer projects. It includes a lot of the qualifications from the EPA that are currently through the WIFA program, as well as stormwater. And again, the staff talking, stormwater is a need in this community that is not funded except through agreements that we can do with the flood control district. A lot of the stormwater costs, they're related to roads, so they're being covered by the streets fund and the 1% tax for streets. Again, not a great source. It reduces the number of overall streets you can do, and some stormwater projects are beyond streets. So one other area staff thinks is important to look at is stormwater projects out there that we could make some headway on some of the stormwater projects that we need, as well as water, especially wastewater projects. Frankly, our rates in the community are very high for water and wastewater, especially when you compare them to Prescott Valley. We have a lot of cost on our capital plan, especially in wastewater over the next 5 years. We got expansions to the big treatment plant to go do centralization and those things, even though there are rates to cover that. If we could do part of those projects with some of these money, it could help relieve some of these high water and wastewater rates. Something to think about. And of course, there's make the necessary investments for broadband to underserved locations. Again, in Prescott, we're pretty well served with broadband. I mean, I believe Sparklight has broadband to everybody's house if they want to pay for it. There are, as we heard from the county a few weeks or months ago, there are areas in the community that are not so well served. And of course, that has to do with population density and the public sector's willingness to invest in things that they don't get a return on. You know, if there's only 10 people per square mile, you're not going to get your money back. But in Prescott, there is not any direct serve. Premium pay to essential workers. This is something we see some of the recipients doing. It has to be essential workers, which means they had to be present. It's not remote people who work remote during the pandemic. It can be provided directly or grants through third parties. It prioritizes low and moderate income people. Key sectors, of course, are healthcare, grocery, food service, education, childcare, sanitation, transit, and public safety. And it must be fully additive to the worker's wage, which means you can't play any special games that you get this instead of overtime type of pay. Can be up to $13 an hour above their current salary, but it cannot exceed $25,000 per worker. So things you cannot use this for, things that have come up that we've heard that we just wanted to let you know we've researched, and you can't use it for that. You cannot deposit it into a pension program. You cannot offset or reduce taxes or a tax increase with this money. You can't defer it. You can't use it for federal match requirements, and you can't just establish rainy day funds with this. And you can't use it for general infrastructure. And again, if there are other areas that you don't feel are real clear, we'll be glad to research them and let you know where to go. Possible spending opportunities, I kind of hit them as we went. We think staff feels facility improvements in the new city hall, even in other buildings, are a real area that we would like to look at and bring you guys back projects and say, we think these qualify. What do you guys think? Go forward with them. Stormwater, again, I think is important. There's a lot of demands on the 1% fund, whether it's streets or whether it's any amount of open space somebody might want to extend that fund to in the next bit. It'd be good to give that fund as much relief as we could by taking care of some of those stormwater project costs. Eligible water and wastewater, again, as I said, that could help offset future needed rate increases. Rates are hard because they're not a big deal for everybody, but there is a fraction of our community that is on lower incomes, and it is hard when every month, no matter how much water you try to save, your bill's still $100. That's significant to some people in our community. And I saved the third bullet for last because, to quote Joe Baines, don't forget the parks, because I need to wrap it up that way. Obviously, we got census things, we have park needs. And again, staff would like to bring back some projects in these if these sound like the areas council wants us to proceed with looking to use this money. With that, question.
So on the park projects and the qualified census tract, that's not something that we could use those money outside of that for park?
No, we can only use it
We're
in
talking
that.
about
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
But there are areas, and Joe's mentioned in talking, yeah, he's still here, even he can talk. During the pandemic, there was a lot of additional use on the tennis courts, which are in Kinlinley. There were other areas there that we could help, revitalize those parks for that use.
Well, I know that earlier this year, that Granite Creek Corridor project kind of got tabled a little bit just because the cost came back much higher than was anticipated, but we could use some of these funds to offset those costs, additional costs.
A portion of it is definitely in that as we look here at the qualified census tract.
Well, just a portion of the creek.
Yeah, a lot of it is outside it, but part of it is in there.
North of Gurley, all the way up.
And there's
to
other
Granite Creek Park.
opportunities with other grants.
Yeah, so there's a small gap on the Granite Creek Corridor project as it connects to Granite Creek Park proper. There's a piece in there where we were talking a couple years ago about farmers market that's undeveloped that fits in that census tract, and that would be a good project.
That might be good. Councilman Shishka, did you have a question?
Oh, sorry.
You're blinking. Oh, no, you're not. Okay.
No, I'm good, Mayor. Thank you.
All right.
That would be me. Thank you. I would just like to stress the importance of public input in guiding our decisions, because with the CARES funding money, I received a lot of input from the public saying that they felt that they hadn't been consulted. And I just would like to say I wouldn't like to see that happen again. So we need to figure out how we can structure this so that we get legitimate public input, maybe a survey on our website, or publicize it so the public can partner with us in the decision on how we spend this $6 million.
All right. Very good. Councilman Montoya.
Mark, so I'm looking at this and it's $5.92 million, give or take a little bit, that we have available. And it looks like staff's identified about 4 different potential areas to spend that money right now. Am I correct in assuming that any one of those areas could basically eat up that entire amount, or is that not how it, do you have a ballpark idea of each of those different 4 projects or 4 areas?
Well, we've done some preliminary, and again, we didn't want to do too much if council had other plans
Sure.
that you wanted us to spend it on. And working with Joe and Tim, we think we could easily come up with $1 million worth of projects for facility improvements. Whether it's the technology or the air filtration or that kind of stuff. Stormwater, they did put together some projects, and there's almost 2.5 million that we could easily come up with in projects needs there. 2.5. The park projects, I don't know.
Yeah, the park projects in totality, the 3 that we've kind of talked about, would easily exceed $1 million.
And then the water and wastewater?
Could use up tens of millions.
That was the one I was thinking about.
That could cover it all. Yeah, for sure. And again,
and
there are revenues there, but just trying to offer some relief to our ratepayers.
Well, it would seem like that particular one, to your point, would have some real immediate positive feedback for our community. It sounds like potentially to people who are living on a fixed income.
Yeah, without additional relief, and again, we're going to be working with WIFA, and we always work with WIFA to try to get as cheap of financing, but also forgiven principal, which is another thing they do.
So that would be eligible.
Some of those
WIFA
could
money?
be as well, and we will look at those because there is a lot of projects coming up in solid wastewater in relation to the expansion of the treatment plant and
Right.
the centralization. It's significant, tens of millions of dollars over the next 5 years.
Okay, thank you.
Councilwoman Hall.
Awesome. Thank you, Mayor. So just a few questions. You had mentioned that the water and sewer, obviously our bills are being high. Do we currently offer a lower income reduction for applicants, for people who are struggling, or I thought we had a program going for at least COVID. If you were having a hard time paying your utility bill, do we offer that all the time, or?
We offer some level of that all the time. We work with people to work on payment plans and to stretch out that payment. There's no fund of money to give grants, but there are different communities in town, different groups in town, a Catholic Social Services, a few others that will help people in need. And again, though, it's hard when the government tries to give a grant program because you have rules about how that has to be allocated and fair and all that, whereas opposed to these other more social groups around town are pretty good at determining if a need really exists and offering help there. And again, we offer the help of stretching out payments and not shutting people off when they're behind if they get a hold of us and make arrangements.
That's wonderful. So back to the WIFA and the wastewater and water projects, do we get more incentive, and I shouldn't say incentive, we get more of an opportunity for principal reduction in our loans if we have an end result of reducing our average water charge. Is that correct or no? Our project has a little bit more consideration for principal forgiveness.
Well, it's not generally principal forgiveness are directed at various grant opportunities that may exist. Not ARPA.
WIFA.
Yeah, it was another acronym. I don't even remember how many years. 10 years ago, it was something where the federal government had a program like this. I think it was during the recession, 2008. Where the monies come through EPA to WIFA, and in addition to the lower interest rates, they actually forgive principal on a loan.
Right. And
we've got $5 million, I think, on one of our water loans for that one at that time. Generally, what they do is just reduced interest rates based on the type of project it is. Is it fully to address a shortcoming in the system? Does it have green technology related to it? Is it, energy efficient type of things? And you get a 10% or a 15% or a 25% reduction in your interest rate, that percentage paid by the grant. Again, I'm hoping with the infrastructure bill that is working its way through Washington right now, WIFA will have more of those forgiven principal options like they had back at the last recession. I wish I could remember. It's going to bug me. That would be good. It was all good. Free money is always good. It was all related to water. Very seldom do those projects fall into the wastewater category for some reason.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that the wastewater will see some relief because that's where we really have some expenses coming.
Oh, good. Well, just as a comment to what I know, obviously nothing's up for motion or anything, but I love the idea of the new building improvements. I mean, that building was not cheap, as we all know, and we haven't sold some of the assets that we had talked about being able to sell and pay off towards that building. So I think if we can spend a little less money to move in, that's a great suggestion from the staff. And then did we talk at all about our payroll for our staff? I mean, our costs of living have gone up tremendously for City of Prescott staff. Is that anything that's been factored into the budget? Is that even up for discussion on funds?
That's not really a use that we could use this for.
Oh, okay.
It had additional essential worker fee during the pandemic where you could increase people's pay for that time. The cost of living and the various other salary things will be part of our budget discussion, which is starting next month.
So at this point, none of the funds can be used towards any of staff's pay?
Only to go back and pay over the period of time that was allowed, which was, better look at the screen because mine's slightly off. Yeah, it was, do you remember the time frame?
December, right?
It started in March, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, and that's one-time pay. It's not like ongoing.
Oh, okay.
And it's not something that staff felt would be easily determined how to make that a fair program or anything. But the stuff you're talking about with the cost of living going up and all that, that's part of our annual budget discussion.
Oh, okay. But you haven't really seen any cities trying to figure out how to work that backwards for staff, or maybe they already did
can't.
it just to keep people.
That's
You
part,
had to pay it during the 2020.
yeah, and that's
Okay.
part of this whole, it has to be of additive to the wage. It can't be in lieu of a raise or, to cover
Right.
a short time increase.
Right.
It's
Okay, thank you.
relatively very specific on that.
Yeah, I figured it would be, but thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Oh, I would just like to say I found it intriguing that the Treasury Department finally realized the importance of open spaces for health, just like Ellen said previously, and this was new guidance that included parks and public outdoor recreation areas. So
If you're in a qualified census tract.
so I think that in this situation, I think that's wonderful that they recognize that, and we certainly have some opportunities here to use that money that way.
All right. So I'm hearing bring forward a list of more specific projects for consideration, or
And public input too, asking the public.
Yeah, I agree with Mayor Pro Tem. I think this is a kind of a windfall of federal funding that can be applied to a number of different projects, either small, medium, or even some relatively large ones. So I think soliciting some input from the public to get a sense of where some of these projects could be funded, I think is probably appropriate. I agree with you. During some of the CARES funding discussions, a lot of decisions were made with very little public input, and we certainly heard the consequences of that. So I think we have a little bit of time to solicit that information. So I think that's a pretty good idea. Could we use some of these funds for additional conservation rebates?
We can look into it, but offhand, I do not see where any of these things fall into that. The water and wastewater and stormwater projects are specific to infrastructure. The stormwater does allow for green infrastructure, which is the capture and recharge of the aquifer stormwater type projects like we did at the rodeo
How about
ground.
improving the water quality? I know that we blend a number of our well water to meet the minimum for EPA arsenic standards. And I think there's a pretty good case to reduce those even below what the EPA says is the minimum.
It's something we can definitely research. I couldn't really give you an answer offhand. Again, it'd have to be an infrastructure, whether that's a arsenic removal plant or something, if that would qualify or not.
Yeah, it's probably worth at least discussing what such a project would cost, as long as it wouldn't eat up all of the funds. But I think that's something that I know the Consumers Union has recommended that the EPA standards are a minimum, and they should be substantially lower than what the EPA says is a minimum standard. And we do have that condition here in our well field and some of the other areas.
We can definitely look at that as a project. When we've looked at it before, the issue isn't always necessarily the infrastructure for that type of treatment. It's the media that is an ongoing purchase cost that affects water rates for arsenic removal. But we will
Very
definitely
good.
look into it.
Let's see. Councilwoman Hall, you're up again. All right, in that case, Shishka, you're up again.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm wondering if it wouldn't be better, rather than a shotgun approach from the public on comment, and if the staff wouldn't be better to come up with specific projects and then have the public comment on those, as well as some other things which may be related to those or something like that. So start out with specific projects from staff and go out from there.
Yeah, and
Rank them.
so they know the criteria too.
Yeah.
I think the reason that's a good point too is because I think there might be misconceptions in the public about what's eligible. So kind of setting a standard of these are eligible projects that have already been defined.
Yeah, and that might allow the public to kind of narrow their suggestions down to things that would be more applicable and justified.
Eligible.
Yeah, I was hoping we'd have more public here today as part of the discussion, but
Yeah, we can talk about public input all the time, but
yeah.
They're all Zooming.
They're all Zoom. Sarah, how am I going on
It's
Zoom?
going to take a while for them to
One, we have one
get the
on Zoom.
memo.
one on Zoom.
One on Zoom today.
Okay, Councilwoman Hall.
Well, that was actually council members, just because that was council member.
Councilman.
Councilman. That was what I was just going to reiterate is because since staff is the one who's dealing with it and they've come up with some solid options, can we maybe make it this is what we'd like to spend or this and give them all options instead of just like a blanket, form for a place to put things. And then also, like you were saying, the limitations, I think it's important for people to know, especially on our parks that actual map, it's not as cities. We think we need to spend the money here. I don't think people understand. I even saw it on the private sector side, people trying to reinvest money and thinking it was part of the, it is it is address specific. It is very specific. And if you try to, because they'll have to report on all of this. The city's going to have to report every dime that it spends. And if one of those addresses falls outside, so I think it'd be helpful too, if we are going to go to public, if that's something that the council decides to do, to show the map, show the limitations.
Have it on our website.
Yeah. And then, so we could never use this to pay down the PSPRS debt. Is that correct?
No,
Correct.
No pensions.
I just wanted to confirm that.
All right. Any further comments or questions?
Yeah, so we will put together a list for public comment on the website or on the social media. However, John thinks would be best to solicit that input, and we'll try to put the details of what's limited out there so we have more of a focused public comment.
Well, very good. Then I think this study session is adjourned.
Awesome.
Thank you.